He wore a grey pullover sweater that had been washed many times. His shoes were clean but not new.
You earned your seat here. Nobody can take that from you.
The morning she walked into the bank to be told she might lose everything she had spent 30 years building, her husband was already on the 18th floor, sitting at the head of the table she never knew existed. She didn't know that yet. She just clutched her leather portfolio, straightened her blazer, and told herself the same thing she had told herself every morning for 3 decades. You earned your seat here. Nobody can take that from you. She was wrong about that, and she was wrong about him. But the truth, the kind that reshapes everything you thought you understood about people, about love, about the quiet nature of real power, that truth had been waiting for her the whole time. This is the story of Evelyn Carter, and the man she almost dismissed before she even gave him a chance. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Evelyn Carter had not become a senior loan officer at First Regional Bank of Hartford by accident. She had done it the hard way, the only way she knew how. She had started as a teller at 23. Freshly graduated, wearing her mother's borrowed pearl earrings because she couldn't afford her own. She had worked double shifts. She had studied at night. She had passed every certification, absorbed every policy manual, sat through every tedious quarterly review with the posture of someone who believed that present mattered. By the time she was 54, she had earned a corner office on the 12th floor with a view of the parking garage. Not glamorous, she would admit, but hers. Her name was on a plaque. Her signature was on loans that kept local businesses alive. She knew the difference between a borrower who was struggling and a borrower who was lying, and that instinct had made her one of the most respected lenders in the Mid-Atlantic region. She had also been divorced for 11 years. Her ex-husband Gerald had been a man of tremendous ambition and very little follow-through. He had wanted the life that came with a successful wife without the humility required to support one. When he left, he told her she was too focused, too serious, too married to her career. She told him that at least her career had never let her down. She meant it to sting. She did not expect it to also be a prophecy of loneliness. Her daughter called every Sunday. Her sister Patricia visited at Christmas. Her friend Diane from the mortgage department had lunch with her on Wednesdays. But the evenings were quiet in a way that Evelyn had learned to fill with work, with reading, with long walks around her neighborhood where the oak trees were old and the sidewalks were cracked and nothing asked anything of her. She told herself this was enough. She almost believed it. It was Patricia who dragged her to the literacy fundraiser on a Thursday evening in October. It was held in the community center on Maple Street, not Evelyn's usual scene. The room smelled like old carpet and coffee and something vaguely hopeful. Folding tables, paper tablecloths, volunteers in matching t-shirts organizing books into donation boxes. Evelyn stood near the door, wine glass in hand, already calculating how soon she could leave without insulting her sister, when a man sat down beside her in one of the plastic chairs. He was not remarkable to look at. That was the first thing she noticed. He wore a grey pullover sweater that had been washed many times. His shoes were clean but not new. His hair was silver at the temples, and he had the kind of face that wasn't trying to be anything. No performance, no posturing, no carefully constructed first impression. He was simply there. He said, "You look like someone who's only here because someone else asked them to be." She laughed before she could help it. Just that obvious? Just your third time checking your watch in the last 2 minutes. She lowered her wrist. "I have an early morning." Everyone at these things has an early morning. They come anyway. His name was Daniel. He didn't offer a last name and she didn't ask. They talked for 40 minutes about books, specifically about why adults stop reading for pleasure, which he believed was the single greatest quiet tragedy of modern life. He spoke with the careful, unhurried attention of someone who had decided long ago that conversations were worth taking seriously. When she left, she realized she hadn't checked her watch once after that first exchange. She thought about him on the drive home. She told herself it was nothing. They ran into each other 6 weeks later at the same community center, a neighborhood planning meeting she attended only because the proposed rezoning would affect her street. He was there because, he explained simply, he tried to stay informed about the places he cared about. "Do you live near here?" she asked. "Close enough," he said. It wasn't evasive, it was just him, precise without being forthcoming, warm without being eager. She found it unusual in a world where most people either overshared or performed mystery. He did neither. He was simply present. He asked if she wanted coffee after the meeting. There was a diner 2 blocks away that he said made the best blueberry pie east of the Mississippi. She told him that was a bold claim. He said he stood by it. The pie was excellent. They were there for 3 hours. By January, they were seeing each other twice a week. By March, he had met Patricia, who pulled Evelyn into the kitchen to whisper with urgent concern. "He's lovely, Ev, but what does he do? I can't figure him out." Evelyn shrugged. "He does some consulting, sits on some boards. He's very involved in the community programs." "What boards?" Patricia asked. "I haven't pushed." Patricia stared at her. "You, the woman who runs credit checks on borrowers before she agrees to a second meeting, haven't pushed? It's different." "How?" Evelyn looked through the kitchen doorway at Daniel, who was kneeling on the living room floor showing her 7-year-old great-nephew how to build something out of blocks, entirely absorbed, entirely patient. Evelyn said, "I don't know," she said quietly. "It just is." Diane at work was less gentle. "Evelyn, I'm saying this as your friend. You've worked too hard to end up with someone who is going to need you to carry him. What does his apartment look like?" "It's modest." "How modest?" "Clean, organized, lots of books." "Does he drive?" "A 2011 Civic." Diane pressed her lips together. "He's the most thoughtful person I've met in 20 years, Evelyn said. "Thoughtful doesn't pay the mortgage. I pay my own mortgage." And that was the end of that conversation. Daniel never talked about money. That was the strange thing. Not that he didn't have it, but it simply never came up. He paid for dinners without making it a thing. He brought her flowers from a farmer's market, not a florist. He fixed a leaking faucet in her kitchen without being asked, driving over on a Tuesday morning with his own tools because he had noticed it dripping and it apparently bothered him more than her. Once, she tried to ask him directly. They were walking along the river path in early spring, the water high and grey from snowmelt, and she said, "Daniel, I need to understand your life a little better. Are you comfortable, financially, I mean?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have everything I need." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not," he agreed. She looked at him. He was watching the river. His expression was unreadable in the way that had stopped frustrating her months ago and had started somehow to feel like a place she could rest. She asked, "Are you in some kind of trouble?" He turned to her then, and the corners of his eyes creased with something that was almost amusement, but mostly tenderness. "No," he said, "not trouble, just choices." She let it go. They got married in September, 7 months after that walk by the river. The ceremony was small, 40 people in her sister's backyard, string lights, a justice of the peace. Daniel wore a dark blue suit that was well cut, but not expensive. His eyes when she walked towards him were still, very certain, and very full. Her colleagues sent flowers and politely cautious congratulations. Diane came to the ceremony but spent the reception in quiet conversation with Patricia, and Evelyn could see from across the yard that they shared a particular look that translated roughly to, "We love her and we're worried." She didn't mind. She was happy in a way she hadn't expected to be at 54. A steady, uncomplicated happiness, like a room with good lights. She had no idea that the room had another door. The first sign came in November. The bank's parent company had been conducting internal audits, something about regulatory compliance, restructuring, a new risk framework being implemented at the executive level. Evelyn had sat through the all-hands meeting and absorbed the language without concern. She had clean files, she had meticulous records, she had nothing to hide. Then, her supervisor, Lawrence Chen, called her in on a Wednesday afternoon. He closed the door. He did not meet her eyes, which was the first thing she noticed. "Evelyn," he said, "there's been a flag raised on the Holloway loan." She went still. The Holloway loan was approved 18 months ago. It passed every review. "I know. It's performing. They're current on payments." "I know that too," he said. "But someone has raised a concern that the approval process was accelerated, that certain risk factors were potentially understated in the application." "That's not what happened." "I understand that's your position." Her position? As if it were a stance she had chosen rather than a fact she had lived. "Lawrence," she said, keeping her voice measured because she had learnt long ago that a woman who raised her voice in this building was a woman who had lost. That loan kept 400 jobs alive in Bridgeport. The financial projections were conservative. I stand behind every number in that file. He nodded slowly. "I hope that's the case, but an external review has been requested. In the meantime, you'll understand we need to ask you to..." "Don't finish that sentence." He finished it anyway. "Step back from active lending decisions while the review is conducted." She walked back to her office and sat at her desk and did not move for a long time. Through her window, the parking garage was grey and still in the November light. Her plaque was on the wall. Her name. That evening, she came home to find Daniel making dinner. Simple pasta, the kitchen warm and smelling of garlic. He looked at her face and turned the stove down without a word. She sat at the kitchen table and told him everything. When she finished, he brought her a glass of water and sat across from her and listened, fully, without interrupting, without rushing towards solutions. "They're implying I cut corners. I have never cut corners in 30 years. "I know," he said. "If they find something to hang this on, even something procedural, I lose my pension. 30 years. He reached across the table and took her hand. "What do you know about the Holloway Company?" "Enough. They manufacture industrial components, good management. Went through a rough stretch in 2019, but the recovery was real. I believed in them." "Was the loan the right call?" "Yes." "Then that won't change," he said simply. She pulled her hand back. Something tight and scared was moving inside her, and she needed to be sharp with someone. "You say that like you know. With all due respect, you don't work in finance. You don't understand what a formal review can do to a career, regardless of the outcome. Even if they find nothing, the flag is on my record. People talk. They've already started distancing." He was quiet. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean..." "You meant it," he said, not unkindly. "And that's all right. You're scared. I don't get scared." "You're scared," he said again. "And you're taking it out on me because I'm safe." He paused. "That's actually something, that I'm safe enough for that." She looked at him across the kitchen table. The pasta was forgotten. Outside, the wind was moving through the oak trees she could hear but not see. "I don't know what I would do if I lost this job," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel looked at her with an expression she couldn't name. Something careful and deep and almost sad, not for himself, she would later understand, but for how long it would take her to be free of this particular fear. "Daniel," she said softly, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer." She waited. "If the bank fell tomorrow, if everything inside it reorganized or dissolved or changed beyond recognition, who do you think would really lose?" She stared at him. "The employees, the depositors, the businesses that depend on our lending. The institution, right? Not you. Your reputation is yours. It moves with you." She shook her head slowly, not understanding, and went to bed with the uncomfortable feeling that he had said something important she hadn't quite caught. Then came the Thursday evening, 2 weeks before the formal notice, when she walked through the front door and heard him on the phone in the study. His voice was different, controlled, clipped, precise in a way that had nothing casual about it. Get me the full conflict of interest documentation by morning. All of it. The acquisition timeline, the holding company structure, and every email he sent between August and November. He had the door closed. He turned. She stood in the hallway. He said into the phone, "I'll call you back," and hung up. Silence. Who was that? Someone I work with. About what? He held her gaze. Something I'm trying to sort out. She knew, in the way you know things you're not ready to examine, that the conversation had been about her. But she couldn't assemble the pieces yet. Couldn't imagine what consulting work Daniel could possibly do that would intersect with a banking dispute at the specific institution where she worked. She let it go. She would think about that moment later, many times. The formal notice arrived 3 days after that. Formal review, possible termination. She was to present herself to HR on Monday morning. She drove to an empty grocery store parking lot on the edge of town and sat in her car, and she cried. Not delicately, not quietly. She cried the way you cry when you are alone and the thing you worked for most of your life is being taken and no one can see, and so it doesn't have to be dignified. She didn't call Diane. She didn't call Patricia. She called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. She didn't say anything at first. "Tell me where you are," he said. She told him. He was there in 12 minutes. He got in the passenger seat and didn't say anything wise or practical. He just sat with her. And after a while, when she was quieter, he said, "I want you to come with me Monday morning before the HR meeting." "Daniel, just trust me, 7:30. Will you do that?" Something in his voice, not pleading, not demanding, just completely certain, made her say yes. If you're still watching up till now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section. This story is about to go somewhere you are not ready for. Monday morning. Evelyn dressed carefully. Her best grey suit, the pearl earrings, her own now, bought for herself 10 years ago. She met Daniel in the lobby of First Regional Bank of Hartford at 7:25. The guard looked up when they walked in. He saw Daniel. He stood up. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," he said. Evelyn felt something shift in the air, something slight and fundamental, like the moment before a storm when the barometric pressure changes and the birds go quiet. She looked at Daniel. He walked toward the elevator and pressed the button for the 18th floor. "Daniel," she said, "that floor is restricted, executive only." He said, "I know." The doors opened. He stepped in and held them for her. She got in. The number 18 glowed as they rose. Evelyn stood very still, her portfolio under her arm, her heart beat loud in her own ears. The elevator opened to a corridor she had never seen. Clean, quiet, carpeted in charcoal grey. A small reception desk, large glass doors at the end. A woman behind the desk looked up. Her eyes settled on Daniel. "Mr. Reed, we weren't expecting you until 9. "I needed to come early." "Of course." She pressed a button. The glass doors clicked open. The boardroom beyond was long and still. A table of dark wood. A wall of windows looking out over the city. And on the far wall, in letters that were clearly been there for a very long time, a framed portrait and a bronze nameplate. Daniel A. Reed, founder and majority shareholder, First Regional Bank of Hartford, established 1989. Evelyn stopped. She did not speak. The world reorganized itself around that plaque. The modest car, the simple sweater, the blueberry pie and the 2-block diner, and the way he had fixed her faucet with his own tools on a Tuesday morning. the community center, the literacy programs, the neighborhood planning meetings, the anonymous employee hardship fund she had heard about for years, the one that covered emergency medical costs for bank staff below a certain income threshold that no one had ever been able to trace to a named donor. All of it. All of him. Daniel. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her face with the same careful, steady attention he had given her from the beginning. "You own this bank," she said. "I built it," he said, 35 years ago, from one branch, one small office, 17 employees. He paused. "It's grown a little." "You've known," she said, "this whole time. You've known where I worked. You've known my loan files. Everything." "I've known your reputation," he said. "It's extraordinary. Has been for years. And you didn't tell me?" "No." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, then carefully, "Because I've been wealthy since I was 31 years old. And I spent 20 years watching people relate to the wealth instead of to me. Employees, women I dated, friends who wanted things." He looked at her. "I needed to know what it was like to just be Daniel Reed of the grey sweater and the Tuesday faucet repair." "That's not fair," she said. "I had a right to know." "You did," he agreed, "and you're right." She turned away from him, toward the windows. Hartford spread out below them in the November grey. She could see the street where the diner was. She could not see the river, but she knew which direction it was. "Why am I here right now, today?" He walked to the table and pressed a button on the conference phone. "Marianne, can you have legal bring up the Holloway Manufacturing Review file?" Then he turned to Evelyn. "Because the review threatening your career was not initiated in good faith. A member of senior leadership flagged your loan because Holloway Manufacturing recently turned down an acquisition offer from a holding company in which he has a private interest. A struggling Holloway is worth more to him than a thriving one. He needed a reason to discredit it." He paused. "Your loan kept them alive. He needed a reason to discredit it." She stared at him. "That's why I didn't intervene earlier. I needed the paper trail to be complete. I needed him to commit to the accusation fully before we could act on it." "You let me go through all of that?" "I should have told you sooner. That was wrong. I'm telling you now." His voice was still steady, but there was something beneath it, a fracture line, barely visible, where the controlled certainty met something much more human. "And I am sorry, Evelyn. That was too much to carry alone." A knock on the door. A young lawyer entered with a folder. Daniel laid it open on the table in front of her. The documentation was thorough and damning. A timeline, emails, a conflict of interest hiding inside a perfectly ordinary-looking business decision. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked up at him. "You are going to clear my name," she said. "Your name was never compromised. We are going to make that official." The review board met that same afternoon. By evening, the senior leader who had flagged the loan had submitted his resignation, citing personal reasons, though Evelyn suspected the personal reason was a very clear-eyed conversation with the bank's founder on the 18th floor. Her record was officially cleared. The Holloway loan was confirmed not only as procedurally sound, but as a model of risk-adjusted community lending, something the bank would be citing in future training materials. Before leaving the boardroom that morning, she had walked to the office of Lawrence Chen. She walked in without knocking. He looked up with the expression of a man who had been told several things in the past 12 hours that had significantly rearranged his understanding of his own professional position. "Lawrence," she said. "Evelyn." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit." "I'll stand. I'm only here to say one thing. He waited. 30 years, she said. 30 years of clean files. 30 years of showing up early and staying late and doing this job the right way. And you called me in and used the phrase, my position. She let that land. When this is over and the formal clearance is on my record, I'd like you to remember this conversation. He nodded slowly. That's worth very little right now, but thank you. She walked out feeling taller than she walked in. Not because she had been rescued, but because she had said what was true and had not flinched and had not let herself become small. That mattered to her in a way that was entirely separate from Daniel. The hard conversations at home came in the weeks that followed. Real ones, the kind that go late into the night and circle back without resolving cleanly. She asked him about the secrecy and didn't accept easy answers, and he didn't offer them. He told her about the death of a business partner who had been his closest friend, a man who had started to change when the money grew, who had become someone Daniel barely recognized by the end. That loss had taught him something permanent about what wealth did to people's ability to see clearly. I didn't want to be seen as a bank, he said. I wanted to be seen. You could have told me after the first month, she said. I was afraid. That surprised her more than almost anything else. Of what? Of losing the version of this where you just liked me, where I was just Daniel of the grey sweater and the Tuesday faucet repair. That version felt like being known, really known. I didn't want to give it up. She thought about that for a long time. She thought about Diane's warnings and Patricia's concern, and the way she herself had almost dismissed him in those early weeks, almost categorized him as insufficient, as too quiet, as a man without the visible markers of success she had spent 30 years believing were synonymous with value. She thought about what she had almost missed. At the company's end-of-year gathering in December, a low-key affair with catered sandwiches and sparkling cider, Daniel attended as her husband, not as the chairman. There was no announcement, no formal introduction, and Evelyn watched him move through the room, talking to a young teller who had just gotten his first promotion, asking the woman from the mailroom about her daughter's college applications, laughing with genuine, uncalculated warmth at a bad joke from the parking attendant. Power, she was learning, did not need to announce itself. The kind that was real and lasting, it moved quietly. It showed up in the right places. It asked about people's children and fixed leaking faucets and sat in parking lots with women who were crying in the dark. Diane appeared beside her. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. You are looking out for me. I was measuring him by the wrong things, she shook her head. The car, the sweater. I was wrong. Evelyn smiled. So was I, for about 6 weeks. Then something in me figured it out, even if my rest took longer. What figured it out, Diane? Evelyn considered. The part that approves loaves, she said finally. The part that knows the difference between what something looks like on paper and what it actually is underneath. Character, in the end. It's always character. One evening, weeks after everything had settled, she asked him the question that had been forming since the moment she stood in front of that nameplate. Daniel, why me, out of everyone? He set his book down. He looked at her the way he had looked at her from the beginning, fully, without hurry. Because you fought for 400 jobs in Bridgeport that you would never see, he said. Because when I told you that pie was the best east of the Mississippi, you argued with me on first principles instead of just agreeing. Because when you were scared, you stayed honest about being scared. Because you built something real, not to impress anyone, but because it mattered to you. He paused. I've known a lot of people with money, Evelyn. Very few of them understood value. You understood it before you knew I had anything. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, I thought I was marrying beneath me. He tilted his head slightly. I was wrong, she said. I was marrying above my own understanding, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit to figure that out. He reached over and took her hand. Outside, the oak trees were bare now in December, their branches against the sky like something written in a language she was only beginning to read. There is a version of this story where the lesson is about money, about hidden wealth and dramatic reveals, and the danger of judging a man by his car. That version is easy and satisfying in the way that easy things are. But the real lesson lives somewhere quieter. It lives in the moment Evelyn stood in that parking lot, alone, crying in a way she never let anyone see, and called Daniel. Not her sister, not her colleague, not her oldest friend. Him, the man with the grey sweater and the borrowed tools and the unassuming life. Because something in her had already known, before her mind caught up, that he was the safest place she had. The question this story leaves is not whether Daniel should have told her sooner. The question is this: how many times in your own life have you measured someone's worth by what you could see? Their title, their car, their address, their clothes, and missed the person standing right in front of you? How many quiet people have we walked past because they didn't arrive in the package we were trained to recognize? And how many of those people, if we had just slowed down enough to have a real conversation, might have offered us something that no resume or balance sheet could ever capture? Evelyn Carter spent 30 years learning the difference between collateral and character in loan files. It took her a little longer to learn it in life, but she got there. And some lessons, no matter how long they take, are still worth everything once they arrive. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you've underestimated, or a moment when appearances almost cost you something real, drop a comment below. We read every single one. Hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Next time, we're bringing you the story of a woman who divorced a man she called a failure, only to see his face on the cover of Forbes magazine 5 years later. She had moved on, he had moved forward, and the distance between those two directions will change how you think about the people you gave up on. Don't miss it. We'll see you in the next one.